You may think that this is some spiritual awakening, but you're dead wrong, and this short video will show you why. See, the average American doesn't even realize he is helpless. He wakes up and turns on NBC. Time to soak up a few half-truths and a few more flat-out lies. Top it off with plenty of garbage from liberals telling him how change is going to fix all of his problems, just like the economy is fixed. Right. Meantime, the only part of the government that has ever done anything remotely useful, NASA, is sounding the alarm, and you know what? We're not listening. Here are the facts. Recently, NASA discovered something super important to the Earth's future, and no, it's not a meteor or asteroid on collision course. This could be even more destructive in the long run. NASA scientist Dr. Masumi Dikbati discovered that inside the sun there are solar conveyor belts that control the sun's magnetic field. That discovery alone isn't a big deal, but here's the important piece. She discovered how these solar conveyor belts work. When the solar belts turn fast, quote, magnetic hurricanes fly through the sun. And later, those magnetic hurricanes appear as sunspots. Sunspots are what we need to worry about. Think of them like electromagnetic storms which shoot out solar tsunamis. And we know all too well any tsunami is extremely destructive. Here's how it works. Normally, our magnetosphere is strong enough to protect us. But when a solar storm hits, it's like standing behind a 3-foot wall in the 2004 or 2011 tsunami. Needless to say, that teeny wall won't stop much. But that's not the worst part. Imagine how destructive a hurricane would be if it shot out tsunamis nonstop. Think about getting pounded by wave after wave the size of a hotel. Now you're getting an idea of what's coming in 2012. We'll be living in an electromagnetic hurricane that pounds us with tsunamis over and over and over. But what you might not know is this isn't the first time that the U.S. has been hit with a solar tsunami. It was 11:18 a.m. on Thursday, September 1st, 1859. British astronomer Richard Christopher Carrington was hard at work drawing what he called sunspots. Almost before he noticed, massive spots flooded his telescope. He'd never seen anything like it. They were astonishing. A couple hours later, the spidery telegraph wire stretching across the civilized world went berserk. Every wire was totally fried. Coincidence? I think not. The next morning, Jamaicans, Cubans, and Hawaiians saw the northern lights for the first time. Granted, the northern lights aren't my area of expertise, but some things aren't natural. American liberals are one, but that's another issue. The only place you should be able to see the northern lights is the North Pole. And all that energy will make our communication devices useless. Case in point, on the otherwise normal Thursday of February 7, 2011, the entire southern part of China had its communications knocked out by a solar flare. NASA expects the solar flares to continue, and that's nothing compared to other disasters. Let's be honest, you'd be plain stupid to ignore the natural disasters that have hit in the past few years. Now, I'm going to show you some important statistics, but let me warn you, these numbers may be disturbing, so please don't take them lightly. In 2004, there was the Indian Ocean tsunami, at least 227,898 dead, followed by the destruction of New Orleans by Hurricane Katrina in 2005. 2006 brought deadly mudslides to the Philippines. In 2008, blizzards pummeled China and Afghanistan, not to mention Cyclone Nargis in Myanmar, 146,000 dead. The 2010 Haitian earthquake, followed by the massive Chilean earthquake, also had terrible consequences, over 231,000 dead between them. And as if that wasn't enough, unfortunately, a byproduct of plate movements and earthquakes is volcanic activity, which means something is going to blow. And blow it did. On March 20th, 2010, the Icelandic volcano Eyjafjallajökull erupted, shutting down most of Europe's airspace. And every other time Eyjafjallajökull has erupted, her big sister, Katla, hasn't been far behind. Now, if Katla erupts, we'll be dealing with a lot more than closed airspace. Then on March 11, 2011, the Tohoku tsunami hits Japan, and over 300,000 people were evacuated to camps. Survivors lined up for hours outside of grocery stores and 7-Elevens for so much as a scrap of food. But that's not the scary part. Ever hear of Yellowstone National Park? Smack dab in the middle of our country is one of the largest caldera volcanoes in the world. What would happen if Yellowstone's supervolcano erupted? Here's what. It'd start with global winter, loss of crops, and large-scale death due to starvation, not to mention the fact that its 53-mile-wide mouth would spew enough magma and ash to decimate our nation from coast to coast. I'm not telling you this to scare you, but honestly, are you ready? The past decade has been one of the most devastating in history. We pray that our land won't see that kind of destruction, but look at the disturbing number of natural disasters that hit the U.S. recently. In January 2010, the 6.5 magnitude Eureka earthquake hit California. The Haitian earthquake was 7.0. Later in April, a freak tornado outbreak stretched across the Midwest and spawned 60-plus confirmed tornadoes in 48 hours. And in June, Arkansas was hit by at least 150 millimeters of rain in the span of a few hours, raising the Mississippi 23 feet, responsible for more deaths. Don't forget about in July when California wildfires destroyed 16,460 acres of property. That's enough land for 32,920 homes. Or in September when Minnesota and Wisconsin are hammered by thunderstorm after thunderstorm, putting an estimated 100,000 acres of crops underwater. And then in October, the North American storm complex stretched across the eastern two-thirds of North America, spitting out tornadoes, hail, blizzards, and cyclones, and doing $18.5 million worth of damages. Later in January 2011, 36 deadly tornadoes broke out on New Year's Eve, destroying $113 million of property. This was an omen of what the year was to bring. And in April, 577 confirmed tornadoes erupted, killing at least 396 people. That's more tornadoes in 1 month than normally pop up in an entire year. Again, I don't think this is a coincidence. Every year has had massive natural disasters. In fact, analysts call 2010 the deadliest year in almost a generation. As sad as it is to say, if you haven't had a major crisis this year, probability says a disaster is coming your way. The only saving grace is as hard-working American men and women, we help each other through these terrifying disasters. We share our food, our homes, and our prayers. And when it comes down to it, our infrastructure is the best in the world. That said, between under-the-table budget cuts to line politicians' pockets and plain old liberalism, I trust the government as far as I can throw them. But it could be worse. In all honesty, we still got the basics. You turn the handle, you've got hot and cold running water. You push a button, and your food starts cooking. But what will happen tomorrow when your lights won't turn on? Let me start by saying I don't want to scare you. But as an American, I feel honor-bound to be upfront with you about the situation. In a few short months, you and your family may have to survive the equivalent of 100 million, that's 1 with 8 zeros, hydrogen bombs being thrown at the Earth. To give you some perspective, 2,500 H-bombs could turn the world into a lifeless chunk of space rock. But that's worst-case scenario. Let's think about what will probably happen. You turn on the stove, nothing happens. Power outages across the U.S. and the world sap your electricity. You can't open your fridge without worrying the food will go bad, and you know unless something changes fast, you're going to be really hungry really soon. Water stations shut down. No power, no water. And you're not sure where to get drinking water from. The one saving grace is the few prepared patriots who have opened their homes to their neighbors, but they just don't have enough for your family to survive, let alone be comfortable. Now, I hate to bring it up, but think about this. If you aren't going to work because of the emergency, do you think government workers are going to show up at their desk? You know the answer. If they aren't working on all these problems, who is going to fix them? You know the answer. No one. Even if the government doesn't collapse right off the bat, when their manpower is dead or missing in action, how long do you think it'll be around? Now, from 2010 to 2011, over 256,000 lives were claimed by disasters that aren't even on the same scale as we're talking here, and the powers that be in the world know this. Truthfully, all the world governments are working around the clock to figure out how to face the 2012 crisis. See, when I read the prophecies and predictions, I was curious. But when I stopped to take a look at what the major powers of the world are doing, I was plain scared. To me, actions speak louder than words, especially with the government. Take a look at some of the things world governments have been doing to prepare for 2012. The United States is using Vigilant Shield to stockpile resources and train for a massive catastrophe bigger than FEMA can handle. Norwegian politicians are constructing a doomsday vault or seed vault on the remote island of Svalbard in preparation for all plant life on the planet being wiped out. And Russia's enormous Yamanta Mountain project, believed to be large enough to house 60,000 people, is barreling along right on schedule. And these are just the claims we know are true. Here's another crucial piece of the 2012 puzzle. How much have you heard about 2012 from the media? Zilch, zip, nada. The only thing you'll ever hear are the media men laughing about what, quote, won't happen in 2012, calling the true patriots like you and I crazy for sitting up and paying attention. We'll see what they're saying when they need our help. Why? Ask yourself, who controls the media? Is it in their best interest to start a widespread panic? Not at all. Remember back in 1999 when the Y2K bug was in full swing? TV, newspapers, and radio played it up as much as they could. Anything to get more people on board. But now they're dead quiet. Because the government doesn't want anyone to know, let alone think about December 21st, 2012. So the real question is, what does the government want to keep you from knowing? Well, no matter what they're trying to hide, there's one obvious tip-off that 2012 is coming. Over the past few years, the climate has been going nuts. Global warming, global cooling, earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes, tsunamis. Just look at the papers. You name it, it's happened. It's not surprising to see headlines like the worst natural disaster in years. And understand this, even if the U.S. government wants to help, there's nothing they can do to survive 2012. Sure, it's old news, but look at the sad state liberals put our country in today. You probably remember when Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana. I hate to say it, but it's a great example of what our government is capable of. Sadly, 1,836 confirmed deaths were recorded. Almost as sad was the way our, quote, advanced government handled it. Months and even years afterward, people still didn't have homes, or any type of help for that matter. And think about this. Katrina only knocked out power to one major city in half of the state. Imagine if it hit our entire country. How do you expect the feds to handle a serious emergency that big? By now, you can see how serious and likely these threats are. The bad news? They're not going away. When I started putting the pieces together, I realized I had two options. Rely on the government to prepare food, shelter, transportation, protection, and water, basically put all my hope for survival in the government's hands, or prepare for whatever the world has to throw at me and be ready to come out on top. Sure, it'd be easier to keep on living like nothing's coming. I could be just an average liberal socialist and pretend life is great and the government's going to take care of me. But you know how far that'll get me. And I don't know about you, but I made the decision to survive. Since then, I've been scouring the internet looking for the best way to not just survive, but thrive. Hours reading news articles, analyzing data, and brainstorming with fellow patriots. Slowly but surely piecing together exactly what the government is trying to hide and how to survive it. There have been dead ends, but now the puzzle is put together, and it's not a pretty sight. Long story short, time is running out. So who is going to save our great nation? We know the government can't, but I'm not willing to let the U.S. slide into anarchy just because of bad leaders. I don't have to tell you right now, America is desperate for leaders. The U.S. needs people with backbone, common sense, and pride, just like our founding fathers. Now, I'm not saying this to be cocky. In fact, if it wasn't for your family's sake, I wouldn't say it at all. But just like the founding fathers, we need Americans who have the foresight to see where we're going and a desire to build our great nation up as the founding fathers intended it, even when the cock and bull liberals run and hide. Who truly believe in the American dream, not in terms of dollar figures on the screen, but honest trade and good old-fashioned prosperity. And we need strong-willed conservative leaders who won't back down and can rebuild the country into what it should be. I want brothers in arms who will protect your family, life, and freedom through any disaster. And it makes me proud to know that I live in a nation where men will rise to the challenge. But we can't do this alone. And I want to do my part to survive this coming disaster, restore our country, and do my duty. So I put all my research, plans, and dreams into a set of electronic files. I call it the 2012 Survival Guide. The primary module, the Survival Guide, is my Bible for 2012 survival. Because once you understand what's coming, you've got to know how to live through it. Mankind, your family, and your world need you to survive to keep our civilization alive. Set up totally for the intense disasters 2012 is bringing, this covers drastic survival techniques that a standard survival guide ignores since it'll, quote, never happen. About the 101 items you've got to have before 2012, or you may never get your hands on them. I know this seems like common sense, but you're going to forget at least 10. And I'll teach you urban survival on steroids. If you or your family are caught in the middle of a city, shopping mall, or anywhere else with over 1 million enemies, you're going to need this information to survive. You'll also understand the simple items you need to tap into your nearly unlimited supply of safe drinking water over and over again. You've probably got these things in your house right now. Then you'll learn the practically automatic ways to generate electricity at the flip of a switch. It's so brain-dead simple you may start using it now. And I'll explain how to protect yourself and your family from much more than knives or guns. This can be the difference between a long, happy life and a slow, painful death. Just as important, you'll know exactly where you don't want to be and how to find the perfect place to ride out the coming storm, and it's not Colorado or Montana. Not to mention, you get the inside method to survive both extremes of temperatures. These are terrific unless you like the thought of freezing to death or baking in your own skin. All these survival techniques are only part of the equation. Here are the bonus guides I've crafted to fully answer the 2012 question.